Welcome back to the Modern Day Way podcast. Today we've got Rich, who's going to be joining us as a co-host, Benjamin, as usual, and we are going to be kind of breaking ground on some subjects that are exciting. And Rich is going to bring a lot of value from the architectural development, St. Louis real estate landscape, and a whole lot of different avenues, really. So, Rich, you want to give a little bit of a background on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Rich Conyers, and I'm an architect here in St. Louis. I've worked coast to coast from places like California to Florida and everywhere in between. Do a lot of work in the real estate sectors where we're focusing on residential and hospitality. So things like resorts, single family homes, custom homes, all the way to multifamily and mixed use. Our specialty definitely has trended towards more of the historic renovation side and focusing on the mixed use that's missing in our urban fabric.
Mixed use. I mean, there's so much opportunity in the mixed use landscape at the moment, especially with offices doing, what they're doing.
There is. There's a huge amount of opportunity because we have so much product in the St. Louis area that's either vacant or underutilized. And we've seen a number of those buildings ourselves with our own projects. And it's really interesting that the thing that's going to bring the most life to the city is also kind of the hardest thing to do. The one project with the most hurdles separating things like retail from residences, whether that comes down to fire code and sprinkling or the way we have to submit when it comes to the city. We've seen this in a number of cities, but the best thing for us is also kind of the hardest thing to do.
Reminds me of a project we're doing right now where we were on the phone about 45 minutes ago trying to solve some problems.
It does. It's an interesting balance between making sure that your rents can meet market rate and making sure that you can keep the cost under control so that everything pencils, because the best design in the world doesn't matter if you can't build it. So we have to make sure that balance is there, but we're also trying to achieve the best product for our end users, whether that's on the commercial side or the residential side.
Mm-hmm. I mean, creating the best product is always going to be the baseline.
Yep.
Now, there's things that we have to do to make projects pencil to where, it makes sense to where we're not losing money on a project trying to create housing for people and, still remain compliant, right? As far as safety codes go and things along that line.
And I think it's really interesting because we say things like losing money, and a lot of people look at it as, well, if a developer spends more or can't charge as much, that just means they make less money. That's not really how it works, right? If the product doesn't pencil at the right cap rate, the bank won't do it. The pref equity won't come in. So to get the deal done, the project has to pencil or it just doesn't get done. It's not that we're just, we don't want to make the extra $100,000 on this project. Almost no conversion projects actually pay out until 5 years down the road. We're not in this to try to figure out how to make an extra whatever number of dollars. We're actually trying to figure out how to get the deal done, because if we can't, it just doesn't happen.
There's a reason that a lot of the buildings in St. Louis are vacant. A lot of reason that a lot of them are not getting utilized for anything. And that's because a lot of these projects just don't pencil.
That is true.
Rich, you said you think that you said mixed use is the hardest thing to get done, but it's the best thing for the city.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think mixed use is the best thing for St. Louis? And why does it benefit the city more to have commercial and residential spaces in the same building rather than separately?
So mixed use, most designers will tell you, is the best way to get an urban landscape that's really, really inviting and interactive. And that's not just a St. Louis thing, that's across the entire world. When we look at cities that have survived the test of time, have people keep coming back to them or keep moving to them, are continually looking at development, growth, increased usability, we're talking about places going all the way back to Paris and London. And, Europe has done mixed use for eons and eons. When you walk through the streets in Amsterdam, you have shops down below and you have units above where people are living, where somebody can walk down the stair and they have this idea in their head, like Friends, right? The show that everybody fell in love with through the 90s, where you walk downstairs, you go grab a coffee, or you go out to a bar, or you walk across the street to a restaurant. There's a reason that urbanization is a thing and so many people move to cities, and it's for that fabric experience. And over years, we've become much more suburban, where every individual building becomes its own target. And what that creates is a whole lot of parking lots and people jumping in their car to go from place to place. The places we love to go, just in St. Louis, places like Central West End, the huge uptick the Grove had a few years ago, places like Lafayette Square. Those are places that you can be at, live at, walk around, go grab a bite to eat, go grab a drink. It has people on the street. It feels inviting, and it feels like somewhere that's actually a community. And I think that's the biggest difference between urban environment and suburbs, is that dense community feeling that you get walking down the street with other people doing things.
Absolutely. I mean, you can walk out your apartment, go down a flight of stairs, grab a coffee from your favorite coffee shop, and then you get home and you can go to your favorite dinner spot, and all you got to do is walk 4 units down.
Yep.
I mean, that is the ideal location for people looking to live in the city. And I mean, London, for example, like you gave. I mean, I love that, go back a long ways, right? You're not even comparing to anything in the United States.
Yeah.
We're looking at, other portions of the world. I mean, you could look at, even name some that are like not like London per se. Like,
I mean, places that people have looked at as destinations or places that they've wanted to live for years and years and years. You can go from Lisbon, Portugal.
mm-hmm.
You can go to Venice, which is very dense and actually has no cars in it at all, right? It's completely walkable. You've got everything from Vienna to Brussels to, I mean, there's the Copenhagen. All of these places have that similar fabric to them. And beyond that, it's one thing to say that people want to be there for the fabric, and I think that's important, and that's something we should strive towards. But the other thing we can look at is we look at things like health and happiness ratings and stuff along those lines. US, we're the most sprawled out country, developed country that's a heavily developed non-third world country. We are all over the place. We believe in land, right? More space is better. And there are aspects of that that are true. However, we have some of the lowest happiness ratings, some of the worst health ratings in the world out of any developed country. We have terrible infant mortality. We have terrible obesity. And a big part of that is every time we do something, we get in a car to go somewhere.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but you look at like the loneliness epidemic.
Yeah.
People talk about this all the time. Like the biggest mental health crisis in the US is that people don't have community.
Yeah.
And that mixed use urbanization causes you to naturally interact with more people than if you're driving everywhere.
Yep.
So I love it.
Yep.
And being around other people a lot of the times makes people more happy.
Yep.
Right.
Familiarity is a big part of it too. Do you enjoy going to the coffee shop where you walk into a Starbucks and they write your name down or whatever and call it out and things like that? Or do you enjoy walking in the local spot that when you walk through the door, they're like, "Hey, Sam, do you want your usual?" So 2 very different experiences. That same thing extrapolates through the rest of the community when you have places that are tight-knit where people are walking around and when they're engaging together.
And people don't move because they're addicted to that. They're addicted to the community that they've built, and rightfully so.
Yep.
And ultimately, I think that's how you change the landscape of St. Louis. It's how you change the culture.
Yes, and there's a bigger lift on that than there have been in some places. We compare St. Louis to a lot of sister cities, right? We compare it to Indianapolis, Nashville, Cleveland, Columbus, Dallas, Kansas City. Like there's all of these examples of cities that have come back in a way from being at a space that we're similar to now and have done something really well with it. And we are not doing some of those things. And one of the biggest things is our downtown was built as an office park, and it still operates as such. People drive there, they go to work, and they leave. We have a ton of keys downtown. People don't realize how many people actually live there. We have an insane number of people per capita that live downtown compared to all the other areas in the city. You wouldn't know that because when you go downtown on even a weekend night, let alone a weeknight, it looks like a ghost town, right? There's not enough businesses and bars and restaurants. In the heyday, when the Landing was popular, when Wash Ave was doing well, when the Rams were still here, there was activity there, right? We get little pockets. We get Ballpark Village. We get things that pop up, but we do not have an urban fabric at night downtown right now to speak of. And that is one of the key differences between every city that's successful and us. And when I say successful, I mean growing, improving property values relative to the rest of the country and attracting young talent. And we constantly talk about how to do that better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is St. Louis doing anything about that right now to try to revitalize downtown, or have they just not even started the process yet? What does that look like?
There's a lot of opinions on how to do that. There's a lot of people that are making they're taking actions to try to do their part. The issue in the past has been the city as a government has been made it difficult to develop, has made it difficult for places to work together to engage in that. We've seen a change in the guard recently on the political level, and maybe that'll start to affect some change. We've already seen some more pro-development approaches, but the big thing is all of our municipalities have to start working together, and everybody being separate from the municipalities around St. Louis County to within the city itself. You've got different wards, you've got different inspectors, different alder people. When you are dealing with all of these differences right now, if you go do a project in Soulard that's historic, you have a different requirement than if you go to Lafayette Square, which is also historic. They're trying to do similar things, but the process is so separated and so disjointed that it makes it a lot harder for people to develop in those areas and improve things. And when we create problems like that, people develop there less, right? If somebody runs into an issue where they got something approved, but somebody else didn't give them the approval and they didn't know because it's, again, disjointed and it's different at each place, then those people don't go back there and improve. So if you have an issue in downtown West or Soulard or somewhere or the Grove, you go, I'm not going to make it hard on myself next time. I'm going to go to the place that's straightforward and I know exactly what I need to do, and I don't feel like I'm getting double backed on after getting some kind of approval.
Yeah, you give me a little bit of PTSD flashbacks.
Sorry.
You know, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, but I mean, it's crazy. I mean, if somebody presses approve, you can still have somebody else come back in and, 30 days later and take it off the shelf.
Yeah.
It's wild. I mean, it's a lot of ways overreach.
Yep.
And regulations should be standard across the board in a lot of ways, especially at historic districts. You shouldn't have different regulations in different historic districts in the same city.
Yep.
They're both historic districts. It's the same city.
True. Yeah.
It's nuts.
Now, is there any argument to the fact that you need different historic districts in order to preserve the specific type of architecture that's present in that neighborhood, and that you need to delegate to more of a local level if you want to match the preservation of that specific historic area?
That would be true if we were talking about elements of the building. So if, for instance, Lafayette Square is very, very a French-driven community, right? That's where it was founded, was by the French when it came in. Soulard was more the German side. We've got these different pockets, right? And so the things like the fleur-de-lis in Lafayette Square may be a different level of importance than it would in somewhere like, I'm not going to say Soulard because they would care about that too, but other places, right? Central West End may have different requirements, etc. But the thing we can do is we can have requirements that span all of those places, and then you have the specificity can adjust on location, but it shouldn't change the process. And that is the bigger issue, is the process is different. Right now, you can go in, you can do an entire rehab, you can get a building permit, you can do occupancy inspections. After your occupancy inspection, somebody can say, hey, we also get to review this and we're going to tell you you have to rip something out you did, which means the process is broken. There's no reason we should be able to go through a process and then have somebody say, well, we count too. That should be baked within that process. And we could do that if everybody worked together. That's part one. Part two is, you can ask 3 people right now. We're going to pick on St. Louis City. They're I'm sure doing their best. Every conversation is always, we're understaffed and we're trying to make it work. I understand that. The whole world's been understaffed since COVID. It's a whole thing. But you can ask 3 different people at St. Louis City what you have to submit for a particular project, and you get 3 different answers. And this is a regular basis thing. This is not a one-off. Almost every project you can call and say, what do I need to submit? And it's gotten so consistent that the answers are different that you actually can't get things in writing anymore. They will not send you a list, because then you could go back and take that and say, no, I did what was said.
No red receipts for the city.
They will talk to you in person and they'll talk to you on the phone. That way there are no receipts. And I think that's by design, because it's so disjointed and it's so inconsistent. If we increase that consistency, we allow people to know what they need to expect going in, because it doesn't improve the project to delay it 4 months or 8 months to get started. All that does is increase hold costs, which gets passed on in the form of rent, or kills the project because it doesn't pencil anymore, right? Mm-hmm. If we make these things more consistent, We know what to expect. We take the thing out that costs money that doesn't actually add any value, which is sitting around and waiting.
Mm-hmm. How do you fix that, right? I mean, you look at history. Okay. So you keep it simple, stupid, for a second, and look at places that are flourishing that St. Louis could potentially look like. What are they doing inside of their local government? How are they regulating things? And ultimately, that solves a big portion of the problem. I feel like we're spinning our wheels trying to figure out how to make it work here. Well, what makes us that much different in the whole scheme of things when you could just take what somebody else is doing and apply it?
We're not different.
Exactly.
I mean, and that's probably the thing that may be very blunt. We are a city with our own makeup, our own history, our own heritage, and we've got a whole lot of different groups of people that have come from all parts of the world to found this city, like also coming today, but who actually created St. Louis, right? It's got pockets of all of these different heritages, and it's phenomenal that we could create kind of a melting pot of a city. However, that never really turned into something that was homogenous. It all stayed as separate municipalities or separate neighborhoods or separate areas. And we never really came together politically or process wise in a way that allowed us to actually continue to grow, expand, and improve the city. In fact, when it started to become homogenous, everybody's aware that desegregation is one of the biggest impacts on St. Louis City in its entire history. When we did start to merge things, when stuff did start to come together, half the people left, right? A ton of people moved out of the city or moved out of certain parts of the city, left big holes, left gaps in income, left gaps in taxes. We've tried to go back and correct things with stuff like a 1% city tax, which makes no sense. Pushing businesses out and people away from living in the city because they have to pay more to be there. The number of people that would come back to the city not being incentivized to not be there would overtake that 1% tax in a heartbeat. There's no reason to have that. If you want luxury taxes on things like ball game tickets and alcohol and hotels, that makes sense. We do that so that people that come to our city help pay for the city. Places all over the country do that. Florida does it really well in that way. They don't do everything well, but they do that very well. They use tourism money to help fund the state at I think 15x number to what Missouri is. We'll have to fact check that, but it's a drastically different number. We are putting that on the people who live in that area. That makes no sense. We're literally pushing down the population, encouraging people to move away from a space that we're trying to rebuild and build up.
You couple that kind of issues with the stigma around crime and other pieces to the puzzle.
Yep.
Now, a lot of that is getting better. A lot of that is coming up in a lot of ways, but there's things that have to change. I mean, there's things that are changing actively, and there's a lot of amazing components of our city as well. This is not a bash fest for St. Louis City by any means at all. If anything, I mean, I love St. Louis. There's a reason that I live here.
Yeah.
And there's super great places. I mean, we could name off tons of great places. I mean, we go out to eat there every day almost.
Yeah.
Spend most of our lives in St. Louis City. But there's a push and a change that needs to come into effect. And if it's not capitalized on while we have the opportunity to capitalize on it, it's going to be the same rodeo all over again.
Yeah. And there's at least, I mean, I would venture to guess that it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50% of the crime issue is perception.
100%.
All we talk about on the news is crime. All we talk about is somebody else being shot. If you talk to anyone from the county over 50, it feels like the first conversation is, I don't want to go down to the city. It's dangerous, right? There are so many people that live, work, and play in the city all day, every day for the majority of their lives, and they do not see that same level. Now, yes, we have vehicular crime. There's things like, windows get broken occasionally. If you leave your car out on the street and it looks like you may have valuables inside, there's absolutely, it's a city. There's crime. There absolutely is. But the perception and what we put out there as how bad it is and how dangerous it is versus the reality is another thing that's killing our city.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you look at a per mile radius and a population count and create statistics around it, well, that's a screwed up statistic to begin with, because our radius is so tight.
Yep.
And not just that, I mean, like you said, anybody over 50, right? I mean, there's this huge stigma, and that's exactly what it is. It's just a stigma. That's why I called it that from the beginning, because it's not necessarily true. It's not. I mean, I drive around St. Louis City all day, every day. I park my car outside. I don't worry about my windows getting broken. I don't leave my iPad on my passenger seat.
Right.
I don't leave my computer out. I don't leave a Rolex on the dashboard. Right. I don't do obvious things. And I don't get my windows broken, which is kind of funny because I got my windows broken about 5 years ago. Probably like 3 times in 1 year.
Yeah.
And I have not had it broken since.
Yeah. Those are the same things you should do in Chicago or New York City.
Absolutely.
Like it's not a drastically different environment. If you are not careful, if you are not thoughtful, you may put yourself in a position where something bad could happen. That's not the end all be all rule, right? There are people that walk down the street that are doing absolutely nothing and something's happened to them. I'm not going to do the victim blame thing where everything is your fault if something happens to you. But generally speaking, if you're smart and you pay attention and you take general normal precautions, it's going to be a similar level of safety of most major cities.
Talk to me about the current divide between the county and the city. Is there any solution here that would benefit from those two entities being united, or are they better separate? What's your opinion there?
I have yet to hear an argument that actually explains why they're better separate. The only arguments I hear over and over are the people in the county don't want to pay for the cost of the city.
Yep.
Which is funny because the cities that have done that have merged, or the cities that have balanced well to, even if they're not merged, even if they balance well to each other, our downtown should be a massive revenue stream for the St. Louis Metro. We should have multiple major league sports teams. We should have tons of restaurants and destinations. And we do. We have an MLS team. We have the Cardinals. We have Union Station. We have, like, those things do exist. But because they're constantly put in this bucket of, well, that's the city, I don't want to go there, or you shouldn't go there, it's not safe, it drastically reduces the impact that can have on the area as a whole. And when that's the conversation, when somebody is 22 to 24, graduating college and looking for a place to live, the only thing anyone talks about when they're trying to convince them to move to St. Louis is cost of living. And I think that's crap. We are never going to be a city that attracts young talent by arguing, well, it's cheaper to live here, so you could move here, right? The people that care about that the least are probably the 22 to 24-year-olds graduating college. They're looking for upside. They're looking for opportunity. They're looking for fun things to do. They're looking for community and culture. And we actually have aspects of almost all of that, but we never talk about it. And it really reminds me of the Big Brother complex, where you can kind of talk shit about your little brother, but if somebody else picks on him, it's a problem. I feel like that's how St. Louisians treat our city, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody complains about it here, and they're like, but if somebody else complains about it, it's like, no, this is an amazing city, right? We need to be better at projecting the fact that this is an amazing city and why to those people. There are reasons that people should want to move to St. Louis.
Absolutely. I mean, there's plenty of them. I grew up my entire life here. I was born and raised in Tower Grove, lived in close to Dogtown, and went to school in Dutchtown. And I love our city.
Yeah.
I think that everybody needs to really take into account when they're projecting their opinions on others that are not from St. Louis or don't live in St. Louis or are from a different place in general. And then they're going to go and spread that almost gossip of that St. Louis is this hellhole, of sorts, right? And it's not true, because if they came to that person and they said, hey, the St. Louis is like this, they would defend their city.
Yeah.
I mean, St. Louisans are freaking loyal.
Yeah.
If I know anything about St. Louisans, and you don't mess with them, right? Or their city.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious how much you follow the Rams settlement and how those funds are being used. Let me just ask every basic question to an architect, right?
So,
City county divide, Rams settlement.
Sam was talking about PTSD. That's mine.
yeah.
So I grew up with the greatest show on turf. Kurt Warner is still probably my favorite quarterback of all time. The Rams are and always will have a special place in my heart. And what Kroenke, the owner, did to this city by pulling that team. You can call it a business decision. I do a lot of things around business in a lot of different ways, from real estate to managing different types of businesses. And I've worked in a number of different industries. And at the end of the day, what was done was so bad for the city that I don't even think I could call it a business decision. It was intentional. They intentionally depleted the team, intentionally made an excuse for why it should be moved to another city. They sold off some of the greatest talents that we've ever seen and replaced them with B+ players that obviously couldn't carry that. Poor Mark Bulger. And they did so in a way that they teed it up so that they could move the team to another city because they felt like doing that. It was obviously incredibly detrimental, so much so that, as you alluded to, there was a lawsuit over it, of which was awarded to the city. And out of all of that, we have an opportunity to take that money and try to recapture some of that heart that was lost by the Rams leaving. And we've been really, really, really poor about actually trying to take any of those funds and doing that. We have talked about using those funds for things like beautification projects, improving North City. There's been a number of things that have been discussed. And to me, that's a lot like when we create buyouts for big box stores. So if a Walmart or a Lowe's or whoever puts a property somewhere and they put a giant parking lot, and certain municipalities will let you pay a fee that essentially says, I'm not going to deal with all my stormwater. I'm going to pay you to upgrade your infrastructure. A lot of those municipalities charge those fees and then they don't upgrade their infrastructure and then it causes flooding. Go look at Brentwood right now. So when you have those types of situations, that's what we're talking about. Is we had a huge loss. We had money and we had money that came back to try to deal with that loss. We lost activity downtown. We lost nightlife. We lost number of people downtown. We lost tourism. And us trying to go back and say that we're going to put that money into anything other than increasing tourism, approaching downtown, increasing business, giving local business a shot that they wouldn't otherwise have. If we're not going to use the money for that, then I don't really understand how we can say that we're doing anything correctly with the funds that came out of that lawsuit.
And yet we've allocated 5.8% of the Rams money to tornado relief because that's a good idea. We can't get government money. We can't get, actual disaster relief money. No, we have to allocate the portions of the money that we won from our lawsuit to lift the city up in general, to put a Band-Aid on what was broken.
Yes. And we need to have funds to deal with the tornado issues. I absolutely say that is something that should be expected of our city, is to come together and help rebuild. That was a 100%. Natural disaster. And it wasn't Katrina level, right? Like, it didn't wipe out the entire city. We've seen other places have to go through things like FEMA, which is, awful. And that's not anything inherently against FEMA. Any government related organization is not going to be very efficient. We've seen that, but they're doing the best they can to help improve after a detrimental issue. This particular case, this is not going to be fixed by groups like FEMA. This is going to be addressed by local people helping out their neighbors, developers coming in and taking buildings that were already half dilapidated, they got fully dilapidated, and turning them into something usable. It's going to be taken by encouraging people to move to the area and putting money into those sites and having something of their own. All of those things can be addressed and should be addressed outside of that money, because that's not what that money was for.
Exactly. No, that money was for. That money was to lift up what was already broken.
Yeah.
Not to lift up what's getting broken.
And a natural disaster. Totally.
Yeah, exactly.
Different.
Right. Should be a both and, not an either or.
Yep. And right now, Missouri just passed a law that, I shouldn't say passed. They're a governor's signature away from passing a law that we will see stadium incentives for Kansas City and St. Louis. There's a very big incentives package. It is necessary. Those incentives not happening previously is part of the justification for the Rams leaving. Some people would say it's a reason. I'm saying it's a justification. They wanted to leave, so they chose to. Losing the Chiefs are not our team. Okay? If you walk around in St. Louis with Kansas City gear and you're not from Kansas City, That's fine. You lost your team. You're heartbroken. You became a bandwagon fan. You got to do what you got to do.
Shots fired.
Kansas City needs to not lose KC, needs to not lose the Chiefs, similar to the St. Louis didn't need to lose the Rams. So I'm fine with incentivizing that. I'm fine with bringing in things like the MLS. That's great for our city. That's entertainment. That's getting families out and doing things. How many families from West County came to MLS games that haven't been to the city for anything other than Union Station in 5 years? You know, that's a great thing. That's another version of the merger that happens without the merger, right? Getting people to go to the city, getting people in the city to, you know, associate with people outside of the city. That should be, we're a metro area. We act like we're divided. The places that didn't act like they were divided were Dallas, which is one of the fastest growing metros in the entire country. And Dallas right now is larger than Missouri as an entire state as a metropolitan area. It has a bunch of communities around it. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you go out to Grapevine or you're downtown Dallas or wherever you are in that area. There's all of these spaces, and people are willing to integrate and work within those areas and work in between them. And their traffic's garbage. So don't tell me that driving from West County to downtown is the reason you don't go to the city. That is crap. All right. Our traffic's not great. It's not LA. It's not Dallas. It's not Chicago. It sure as hell is in New York City. So that's a crap response to saying that's why you don't come down. The reason people don't come down is perception. The reason people don't come down is because there's not a lot of places that I can go, especially downtown, where I can go drop my car off and we can walk around for the evening and go have dinner, go have a cocktail, you know, go do whatever you want to do, bowling, you know, axe throwing, something. There's little pieces of that. It's not enough. And it's obviously not enough because people aren't going down and doing it on any kind of regular level.
There you have it, folks. Tangent here or there. A lot of great information and an introduction to Rich.
Ultimately, we care so much about the city. We want to see it be successful. It is not dying. It is definitely not dead. And I want to start there. Like, this is a real city that a lot of people have a huge amount of it in their heart. A lot of people have grown up here. We want to continue to see families come here, young professionals come here. We want to continue to see the city improve. We want to continue to see people build communities and get closer. This country is at an all-time high of being separated and disjointed and not working together. I would really like to work against that in our city.
Absolutely.
That doesn't get you fired up. I don't know what will.
Right? I mean, our heart is with St. Louis, and we're doing what we can to make a difference.
Yep.
And every day we'll keep doing that. And so thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you.